The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
On TECHxploration, your trusted tour guides, Craig and David, will explore every corner of Florida for the latest tech and innovations emerging within our communities as an inside look ahead at Florida's future.
Welcome to episode 15 of TECHxploration on the Florida Podcast Network, where we're discovering the tech and innovation spaces thriving under the Florida sun. I'm one of your hosts, Craig.
And I'm David. We're from Clarity Creative Group, an Orlando-based digital marketing agency. Let's get it.
Today's episode is a little different. Instead of talking to an amazing guest, we're discussing some of the biggest headlines in tech news.
If you haven't noticed already, Craig and I love talking about what's going on in the world of tech. From Google and all their intricacies to TikTok and social media, listen in to learn more about what's going on in all things technology.
Hey, you might even learn a thing or two. Big news in all things search, and that is near and dear to our hearts. David, Google is modifying their algorithm to tackle clickbait. First, explain to the folks here, what the heck is clickbait? I try to always talk to my wife and mom about it so they stop clicking on them, but they keep doing it.
Over the next few weeks, they said it's going to get rolled out. Next week being the week of the 22nd or so, Google will be modifying the search results to hopefully lower some of these things like clickbait titles, AI content.
Give an example. Give an example of a clickbait. What is clickbait so that a listener could connect that?
Okay, so I have a really good one, right? So I was looking up children's Netflix shows because my daughter loves watching educational Netflix shows. And it was a list of 10 or 15 or whatever it was that I was looking at. And one of them was Kids in the Hall, because kids love halls or whatever it was. And I could tell that somebody never really actually probably watched Kids in the Hall, knowing it's a, adult, I would say like a teenager and plus comedy, but it was put in there, right? So it's low quality content, but the content, the headline was like 10 or 15 or 20 Netflix, shows that you should watch or whatever it was. Again, for kids, it was exactly what I wanted, except I quickly realized maybe on like the 5th or 7th that it was not actually well put together content. It was spammy content that got me to click on it so I could be in a place where there's 25 ads.
You nailed it. It's sensational headlines that get us to click. That is what clickbait at its core is. It's headlines that are so close to what you were searching on that it successfully gets you to click on it.
And there's some good clickbait stuff, right? There are some fun articles that are not, you didn't read them for the quality of the content, but you got them because it was fun, or you got it because it was interesting, right? And that's okay. But the problem is everybody's been conditioned, and sites have now become conditioned to start putting out not great quality content, but it's just content that's maybe being produced by AI content or low quality written stuff. There's not value in there. It was literally said something about like kids and hall. And I was like, yeah, no, you literally just looked at the title and thought that was probably interesting that kids are at school or something like that is what
this pertains to literally our day to day, like the business that we do, where search engine optimization, commonly referred to as SEO, is all based around keywords and people searching something to get results. So what are they going to try to refine? What's Google doing to change that algorithm?
So Google hundreds of times a year modifies the algorithm. It's being modified frequently and there's changes. But what happens is there's these kind of core large changes that Google will announce and then they will roll them out over a series of weeks. They did this back in the day to try to tamper down on different types of spam that we've had over many years. And the key part of this one is going to be to tamper down AI and low quality content. Low.
When you say AI content, I want to just put a note on that. So there's a bunch of softwares out there where people can basically generate text words using technology, using artificial intelligence. And because it's not written by an actual writer with intent for the reader, it's not as quality in terms of it's not as readable, and it's gaming the system a little bit.
Right. A lot of filler words, a lot of and most of those are just scraped from the first page of Google anyway. So it's just regurgitated content. And the whole idea is quality content that's written with authority that helps explain and gives it's good user experience, all those things all rolled into one that this is supposed to tackle.
What a human writer could do, what an actual person with intent to write an article would be doing.
Right. If you're an expert in that field, if you actually watched all those Netflix shows, you probably would be able to give a better top 10.
You'd write a great post.
Right. Because you watched them and could share information about them. And that article right there should naturally rank better than those other ones, right? And hopefully this will help fix. And maybe the one that was of good quality was on 15, but the one that was maybe on Huffington Post or on BuzzFeed got there because of this situation. And we'll see. We'll see what kind of comes from it. Google's done other ones in the past, so it's happened. But again, the whole thing is that Google can't be outsmarted for too long.
Exactly. That's the end point on anything that comes to the search visibility, the algorithm, what you're going to get when you type something in. Even though the system can be gamed for a time, it's not indefinite. They really work diligently to serve the user of search, meaning those of us that are typing a phrase in, typing a sentence in, or typing a word in to get results. Over the long term, Google's doing whatever they can with a huge team of developers to make sure those results are authentic and actual data that you want, not just being, again, like I mentioned before, gaming the system. David, we've talked about TikTok, we've talked about Instagram in the past, we've talked about Facebook. Something's going on where while we're using these in browsers, meaning like we're on my phone, I'm in Safari, I'm in Chrome, there's something going on where my data is not so secure, it feels like. What the heck is going on here?
And a lot of this comes from when Apple recently changed over, right, and are not allowing for as much tracking to go on amongst apps and within the device. So what really has happened is a lot of these apps have went, okay, they need to start tracking things themselves, okay? We're not talking about Safari or Chrome within your browser, but I've probably sent you an article, whether your wife does for TikTok, or maybe you find one on your Instagram app on your phone. Normally, a browser window opens up
within those apps.
Within the apps.
Got you.
It's not the normal Safari one. Normally, there isn't a top browser bar and things like that. Those are being injected with some code. Not going to get into the technical side of things, but unfortunately, people are finding through some testing that it's tracking what you're clicking on, what you're scrolling. So if, let's say, you're signing up for an Amazon product and it opens up there and you sign into your Amazon account in there, what's being logged? There's some worry that I would say you go over to your regular Safari or regular Chrome browser and make sure.
So to clarify, you're saying that when I'm in some of these social apps, this happens commonly. I'll be in TikTok, I'll see a cool ad that's typically coming from ads. I click it. I think I'm in my normal browser, Safari, or I'm not, though. I'm in a native browser within TikTok.
Right. And normally on the bottom right, there's usually a little Safari icon that you can click on, and then it'll just open that page up in Safari.
So that's what we should be doing.
You should do. You can follow those links. Those links aren't bad. It probably helps TikTok know how you interact with it, but take it out of there, put it into your regular Safari browser. If you're going to do any logging in, if you're going to go into any passwords, if you're going to go deep into it, right? Don't use
credit card, right? Would that be
definitely? Oh yeah, if you're going to buy something, absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so this is big. Now, what about if I'm in Instagram and they're using theirs? It makes it feel like a native shopping experience. You're saying there's a concern there.
Well, right within their app, it's probably going to be a safe experience. Right now, there is not a nefarious use for it.
Right. Nobody's getting scammed.
Right. But what we're saying is that, well, it's probably best that you don't be in a place where all that stuff could be tracked. And we don't know where it's being tracked because there's a kind of a big gap in terms of, we see that they can track it. Are they tracking it? And what are they tracking? Nobody's really publicly shared that. There are a few apps, though, just to be clear, that don't do this, right? There's plenty of in-app browsers that show up. Twitter does not have any known injection of tracking. So there's like WhatsApp, which is also a Facebook company, is not doing it. So there's ones that, even in the same company, are having, like Reddit's good. There's other ones that are in the browser experience are not doing anything bad, but for some reason, some of these are. And we don't have a lot of answers. It's on the iOS devices. And so there's no answers on why, right, that this is happening.
There anything, a website people could go to or something they could use to potentially see? Because again, with all this new security stuff, Apple's even marketing with a lock now. Security is a thing.
Yeah.
It will be a thing forever. Is there anything people could do to at least check on this, or is it not worth it now?
There's a company that just put kind of the study out. This is what kind of happened all of last week that really got this going. The inappbrowser.com, the article will be in the show notes with a link to it. They were the ones that released some of this information, and they've kind of shared, based on their testing, which apps are injecting stuff, which ones aren't, and which ones you're going to be careful about a little bit. So just like, we don't know what their goals are. We don't know what they're looking to do. So
again, just to reiterate, it's not that we're saying there's any villains out there at this point. It's just that this overarching kind of like meta discussion of security as a whole isn't going anywhere. It's only going to be more and more relevant. So the user, that's us, knowing what we're giving, if you will, when we're clicking on links would be that important thing. It's an overall education.
Not to go too far, but I'm very pro like tracking.
Sure.
Right? I love
it's part of our business.
It's part of our business. And I know people are like, oh man, I don't want Google to know that I'm a 30-something male that likes the beach or whatever. But I want them to know that, so I get ads, and I don't want stuff that it's not relevant to me, right? So
you're leaning into the algorithm.
There is a good point of tracking. There's a bad part when we don't know what they're tracking or why they're tracking it. This has a little bit of a gray area right now, and so I think there's a kind of a thought of protecting us. So,
absolutely, and the protection is key. Along the same vein, we want to provide opportunities and things we learn to help people. Google Chrome's got a bug, and this is nothing new, guys, nothing new. David's going to outline what is a Google Chrome bug and what can you do to avoid or update accordingly.
Yeah, well, and iOS has a similar thing that came out in and around the same time too, right? Let's combine two articles together, right, which is about security. And I know we briefly touched on it on the last headline, but at times there are things that nobody knew was a problem. Right. Let's just simply say that. And it's a lot of it stuff's really not horrible, but you don't want things to
vulnerabilities.
You don't want to set yourself up for vulnerabilities, because as vulnerabilities go over time, they only get worse, right? They can only be exploited more, and more bad actors get involved, right? And usually when they're released, there's a good amount of time that you should probably update, right? Before it really becomes a issue. And both Google Chrome and your iOS both announced two big security updates that should be dealt with.
Do they update automatically, or does the user have to always go in and update it?
So for Chrome, in theory, it does update automatically, but you got to close your browser. And the easiest way to know this, usually in the top right-hand corner where your triple dots are in Chrome, it usually has a little green update, right? As soon as you see that, within that day, I would hit the update button, let it update. You also can just update it by closing your browser window and reopening again. It will also do it. So closing your browser and reopening. I know you got to close all your tabs, but a lot of times they'll reopen again, so you'll be okay. So it warns you and lets you know. Assuming, though, that you're maybe shutting your computer down at night, but if you don't, you might not be updating. So for Chrome, there's that. For iOS, there are security pushes that you'll get your message on your phone. They'll say, oh, during the overnight when your phone's plugged in, we're going to update it.
Does that work?
It does. They do a lot of those. But there could be things like if you don't plug in your phone every night, or if you don't have a very good schedule with charging of your phone, or it's inactive for a certain period of time, and they will use that time to push the update to your phone. If you don't regularly charge your phone while you're sleeping, or there's off times where like you're not actively having a set schedule, it makes it hard for it to update. So when that's the case, it only takes a few minutes. You can manually push the update.
Go to system preferences, go to software update.
Click it. There's normally a little red dot or whatever in the settings that takes you there, and just do an update. Just push update while you're taking a shower, going for a walk, or taking a minute where you don't need your phone, so that way it can do its thing.
These updates are important, guys. I'll give an example of when, and at this point, if you listen to the show, Dave, we're personal friends, let alone business partners. I've been in the NFT space, and David pinged me on Slack and said, hey, you need to update your Chrome and your MetaMask plugin because there was a vulnerability. I didn't even know about it. He saw it because he's so tapped in with what's going on with Google and he understands the Web3 space. But he directly said, hey, you need to make sure you do this update on both of those things because, again, vulnerabilities get exposed. Why does this happen? There are just people out there. David referenced the term bad actors. That's a real thing. There's just people out there that are, I don't know they're chaos seekers or they're just trying to, I don't know the why. I'm not wired that way. David's not wired that way. But because code is such this beautiful thing that anything is possible with code, unfortunately, that opens up the door for those individuals to come in and try to literally break things. And thankfully, I'll go the positive on this. Companies like Google and many of the ones we trust, the publicly traded companies, some private ones too, work really hard to make sure that they can fix these things quickly.
Yeah, their brand is built on the privacy, the safety. If Chrome had a vulnerability that, let's say, something was stolen because of that, I mean, like nobody would use Chrome anymore. We just move to other browsers. They lose that.
Exactly. And so Chrome is one of the safest.
Right. If iPhone, they lose the sale of iPhones.
That's right.
There's so much important. So just know that when something like this comes out, it's so important just to update. Just do it. I know it's uncomfortable for a few minutes and we're just not used to it, but it's just one of those things that it's like, just take a minute and just put the time in. I was very slow at updating things before. I had fears of that it was going to break something. We're past that. All the technology now at this point, it's tested enough, it's set enough, it doesn't bring things down on the occasion, but not enough that you have to not update things. If you're worse in the vulnerability stage of what the bad actors could or could not do, you know that you just don't want to open yourself up to.
This one excites me. David, we've been doing this web thing, this tech thing for nearly 15 years at this point. And I've jokingly asked you this, which tends to irritate you, but I've said to you in jest, but also realistically, that I don't fully understand how the internet works and how we connect to the internet. This is happening in my home right now. Like a network that used to show up on my phone doesn't anymore. And I'm calling Spectrum and I'm frustrated, and Ethernet versus Wi-Fi. How the heck do we connect to the internet, and why is that relevant now with everything that's changing?
From what seems to be talked about, right? It really depends on where you live and what you're given, right? So some people have wireless only, right, on their phone. Some of them have wired internet of fantastically fast speeds. And then some of them are using like a satellite, which is only getting better, but rural areas don't have Spectrum, right? They have a very minor provider that can only give them a certain speed because they don't have the network. Now, you want to know about the internet. There is a great show called The IT Crowd. And I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a joke. If you look up the internet in a box, it literally was they jokingly provided a black box with a red light on top of it and told one of the CEOs from like 15, 20 years ago or whatever that this was the internet. That's the internet. And they had it and they were allowed to borrow it or whatever for a week or something. And it was just really funny. So it is a black box with a...
The internet, ladies and gentlemen, is a black box with a red light on it, but it is also a massive network of information that's happening in real time, adding to itself exponentially over and over again. So the ways we connect to it are typically in this modern era, right? We're recording in 2022. Internet still needs usually fiber optic cable to get to your home, but mobile has changed the game, has it not? We get data, 5G now.
Well, but no matter what, the mobile, it's always connected wirelessly to then connect to a data point on the ground that has cables that connects to a server sitting in the middle of Michigan.
No, this even blew my mind. You remember we've jammed on this just personally. That Cleo Abrams, who we liked from
Vox,
she's great. She went private and has her own brand now, and she had a segment on. There are literally I couldn't make this up. There are many mile long internet cables on the ocean floor.
Right.
It blew my mind.
What was it for the telegraph or whatever? When they put the telegraph line, I believe they still use the same path. Like they're literally like just sitting on top of telegraph.
And they have to give extra slack and cord to go down the trenches.
Yeah,
because you don't want it just hanging out or whatever. But this is wild. So I don't think people realize.
Five years ago, one of there was a European country or whatever that lost internet because somebody cut one of those lines or lost part of the internet because of that. Now there's redundancies, right? Right, because you can go from Europe to North America across the Atlantic, or you can go the other way. Now the airway is longer, so your internet will slow down a little bit, but you don't realize that that's slowing down because
ladies and gentlemen,
the other way around the world.
The internet is a series of thousands, probably way more than thousands. I would say at this point, it's probably millions of miles of cable,
right?
Maybe more. All throughout. You can't see these cables. They're buried underground. They're under the ocean. But I have heard of a thing like Starlink and satellite internet. And is that the next iteration? Is this going to eliminate cables at some point? Or it can never, because it always has to be some sort of hub?
It probably can't fully be a wireless service. I mean, that's an interesting question.
Is Elon going to get this where we all beam up to that thing? That thing will go to a data center, which at some point data centers would have stacks and servers.
I still wonder, though, if wired will always still be so fast and it could always...
Speed will win, is what
I think will always win.
Speed will always win.
And when given the abilities, right? Like, do you want a wireless connection or do you want a wired connection? If you have the option of a wired, it's going to be better because you have less opportunity for interference, right?
Correct.
And I get that, your microwave oven doesn't probably throw too much of a wrench into your Wi-Fi, but maybe it does. Maybe it throws it down by a few megabytes.
Well, that's real, because if you're in a busy area, even with your cell phone, things can and will work slower. There's literally just the bandwidth of the network.
Right. And usually wired can get less chunky. So for that, I think we're still going to rely somewhat on it. But I think being able, though, to give some of rural America or rural countries the ability to have internet, and sometimes internet without much. I know Elon Musk set up Starlink in Ukraine to allow, and it can be done with like power stations, without necessarily.
So the government couldn't shut it off.
Right. So now you don't need it to run through. So for that, for emergencies and for other things, it is huge that way. And when you don't have the infrastructure to have the cabling as the core to what you're doing. So it is going to be a part of it. At some point, it might catch up and wireless might be there. I mean, we probably have another 10, 15 more years of
No, but I think that's fun. It's so fun that everything about tech iterates. Everything gets added to. Some things get jettisoned and thrown away because the tech's no longer relevant, for example. Like you brought up the Telegram. We're not using that, but it was built upon that, right? And I think it's so interesting for us to have it like this about how we connect to the internet and how that's even changed from phone dial-up to Ethernet to space.
Would we have internet if they couldn't figure out how to get the telegraph cable across the ocean?
We would not have internet.
Probably stopped. Right. That would have been
or we would have more localized internet.
Or maybe localized internet, or maybe they would have had to go wireless sooner.
Correct.
Would have been interesting, but it still serves a purpose, right? Then that's what technology is. Right now, the new satellite abilities is really great, and we'll see where that builds to.
AI, artificial intelligence. We brought it up briefly earlier in the context of text, meaning you can literally go to sites like, I think one of them's Copy AI. There, you can have AI generate text. We don't recommend it for anything you're ever going to try to actually get ranked, just because, to the point of the tech headline earlier, Google can and will be telling the difference. But this time, AI is generating pictures, art. AI-generated art has hit the TikTok platform. They're doing backgrounds. Things are happening. David, give us a little context into, maybe not going deep into how that works. I know that's all thing, but whatever level you are knowledgeable on, what are they doing here? How is it? You even played with this internally with our team. You did a little AI fun exercise with us. What the heck is happening? We type words into a thing. How does this do what it's doing?
Okay, so the fastest way to say, so they've taught a computer what is space, what is the Eiffel Tower, what type of art Da Vinci does, right?
Wait, how did they teach the computer that?
So they loaded in a ton of what this is. They loaded in pictures and pictures and pictures, right? They loaded in all these things and allowed pixel by pixel, it understands it. I mean, it's literally a pixel that makes up a thing, and it can fully figure out, right, that the Eiffel Tower is built by these pixels, and Da Vinci makes art that looks like this. So over time, it has begun to understand how that works. Not like as in like could like talk back or anything.
Skynet, they're coming.
No,
they're coming.
Everybody,
oh my God! End the episode. They're coming.
But
the robots.
But so there's a couple models out there. There's DALL-E Mini, which is available that people can tap into, and there's a couple even apps out there that are using some of that technology that you can play with. Like we the one that we used internally is called Crayon or whatever, right?
Right. It sounds like you're trying to say crayon,
right,
in a fancy way.
And CRAIYON or whatever.
But I think that is what they were doing.
Right. It's definitely what they're doing. And you could type a few words in. You could type like skyline of Orlando painted by Da Vinci, and it will have that styling. And you could have a frog eating an ice cream cone, and it does it. And it's drawing it because it knows what a frog is. It knows what an ice cream cone is, and it just draws it out.
Sometimes it looks like exactly what we would think, and other times it gets wild.
Some are better than others, and it's still figuring it out. We are in the it does a toddler's worth job, right?
I have seen some better than that, though. No, I will say
the DALL-E one is significantly better. That is not for public use at this time. There's only it's very private, and it's only being used.
Is that what TikTok is tapping into? Because the look and feel. So TikTok added this functionality literally this month, and users can use the AI generator. You put words in, and it's mixing with their green screen functionality, so you could put any background behind you. Some of them are looking really good.
Yeah, it's using the core of the DALL-E, which is, again, it was probably 5 or 7 years of AI training that they were doing to this thing. So again, we're talking, you're getting a portion of the technology, and it's just kind of be fun because now you can create backgrounds that are unique, right? So there's no copyright infringements that you ever have to worry about because they're generated based on what you need. And you can have something now that did not exist before, right? If you dream it, think it, type it in, and it can draw it, it might look good.
This opens up an interesting discussion we won't go super deep. Could it be its own episode, and we'll get someone that's dealing or working in AI. So this is AI art, or we were talking about AI text. Do you believe there's a trajectory where this type of technology means less people would be needed for these type of services at some point? Can AI text ever get taught enough from writers to be native? Can AI art, I bought some AI art through the NFT journey. It's cool. It's super cool. And I enjoy it. But my favorite stuff that I've ever bought or owned, definitely a human did it. Do you think that's coming? Are we 20 years away from that? Is that even too hard to think about? This is an opinion. This is just an opinion. Yeah. I'm wondering what your thoughts are. We always sometimes are on two sides of the coin of this.
I do think that it will serve a purpose, and there is a lot of value, i.e., I love the idea of a background being able to be generated by it, right? Because a background is just that. It could be blurry. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I do think that there's going to be moments where AI generated art or photos or things will be important and can be used when we can't make something happen. But I still think that you can't substitute the real thing. You can't substitute the research, or you can't substitute a situation. There's a sunset that looks beautiful or something on the plains of the Serengeti.
The AI will never
can't
see that
real thing
until we go to Westworld, which means the AI has eyes. They can see the sunset,
and they've taken us over.
That show's dope. Are you caught up?
No, I got like 3 seasons in. I stopped or whatever. So
okay.
You might be.
I know why though. So season 1 was the best, but this season 4, two was pretty. Two was good. I like 2. 3 cliff dive.
Yeah,
4 brings you back.
We started 3, and we're like,
no, you got to give 4 a chance. That was unintentional. That wraps our AI segment for the day. And now to close out our special tech headline edition of Techspiration, we found a really fun things that used to be popular on the internet. And we thought, what fun to run them down almost like stream of consciousness and just talk through a few of them. This is definitely for either if you're on the younger side as a listener, you may not have known of these. And I think that's fun that you'd be like, what? These guys, why are they saying these dumb things?
This was something that this
was a thing.
Yeah.
So right out of the gate, first one, custom cursors for your computer, literally the little arrow.
Yeah, they would change colors or they would animate or do things.
A hand, a lightsaber.
Oh, yeah. Like I remember like your mom likes cats. I think she had one that was...
Oh, she definitely had a cat.
A cat one or whatever. I was like, please get rid of that. Please get rid of that.
It's awful experience, but it was this brings me back. I know this might not be on the list. It's from the MySpace days of like customization for the sake of you can.
Because you could.
Because you could. And by the way, this is a thing in tech. This is us accidentally getting to a really interesting philosophical point. Much of tech happens and gets iterated on because you can.
Because you can.
Because you can write the code to do it.
We're just going to do it.
We're going to do it. We're going to see what happens. Did cursors get better as a result? I don't know.
I don't think so. You know what it probably just did, though, was just caused everybody to put a virus on their computer. Every custom cursor was just a virus.
Custom cursors, dead. Another dead thing, but a favorite, an absolute favorite. We are big fans of Google, David being a Google beta from the beginning of time and like Google partners, but they were not necessarily the first or most dominant search engine. Alta Vista, Lycos, AskJeeves.com, which then became Ask.com, search engines that don't exist anymore because Google destroyed them.
Well, they weren't great. And that's the short end of it. Not great experience. Not going to exist much longer.
I mean, enough said, right? Yeah. Google wins. Y'all lost. Even their second most popular search engine, they own that one. It's YouTube. Chat rooms. AOL chat rooms. This was a straight vibe, David.
That was like the thing. You used to connect with people randomly. And you know what? It's funny, though, is that was the precursor to social networks.
It really was.
And
I'm glad you said it that way.
It got us.
I agree.
That. It made Facebook something.
That was the pill, right? If you could suck down that pill, and you knew, oh, wow. So instead of a phone call, because texting wasn't big back then, I'm typing to someone. I remember in my teens, that was a highlight. I had a couple core friends that after getting home from school, finished some homework, we would jump on Instant Messenger in a chat room. You and I may have actually chatted back in those days. Yeah. That's a real thing. AOL Instant Messenger was a thing.
And you know what else it started? Usernames.
Bingo, bango. Handles, names that represent, dare I say, is that even not the precursor to what now is being talked about quite a bit? Digital identity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time.
The beginning, the origins of digital identity come from those early days of forums and chat rooms. I'll just throw forums in because forums also were a thing. Now, I have a question. This is an actual question that organically comes from this. So forums were a big thing. Chat rooms were a big thing. We still see tenets of that. Reddit's success is based on that. Social media success, and even how Discord became a huge thing for gaming.
Mm-hmm.
All of that functionality is based on chat rooms and forums, or am I missing something?
The essence of what an AOL chat room was, right? Whether it's Slack or Discord or things, it's the same thing. It was just in a really weird place with some really weird people that
ASL. You had to figure out age, whether you're a boy or girl, or where you were.
Yeah, for some reason we wanted to know all of that, and we
needed to know it quickly,
and it was before we could talk.
It was 17M FL,
and then we might be able to connect. We might not. We really just said 3 or 4 things, and then we just left.
It was over. Right? It was over.
But yeah, I think it's what started and got people comfortable with it.
Website view counters. This was a huge thing. You've been developing and writing code for, at this point, I don't mean to date you, but I am 26 years, I think, you've been coding. Yeah, so you've been putting sites on the internet for a long time. How many of your early sites had a website view counter at the bottom?
Well, I can say at the first 6 years, always had a counter. It always was great because, of course, like for an entire day, I would just sit there and hit reload because the counter would go up each time you reloaded to make sure that at least it wasn't going to be stuck on 003 or 00000.
Because no one's going to your website.
Nobody was really going to my website back then. But it was like the bee's knees to have, right? Even if the numbers were sucky. You know what the funny part is? I think I saw a website, I want to say in the last month or whatever, when I was on vacation, that still had one.
Well, that was a whole kind of element of culture at the time. So you were tracking things. That was also synonymous with the time when McDonald's was tracking how many burgers they sold before that got absurd, when it went into the bajillions and trillions and they said, you know what, we're wasting money on putting numbers up. just like that, Google Analytics innovated over the website counter. You no longer needed to keep track that way.
Right. More accurate numbers, more information and data that really matter versus just how many times your website loaded, and realizing that we didn't actually need to share that data.
That's right. The next one, rest in peace, not just Flash games, but Flash as a whole.
Flash as a whole is gone. But what about even like Flash videos? Like, remember, like, what's the I'm forgetting the name of it. The one with the, oh man, mind.
Was it a game?
No, it was a videos. Remember, there was just that one website that only would do videos. Really, my wife sings them. There's one that she sings still to this day from like 20 years
Flash
ago.
was a
Flash
big deal.
Games, Flash, like little movie things that people would do and watch.
This was an Adobe product, I believe, right?
Oh.
Was it theirs organically, or they bought it?
I believe
That might be too old. That might 20-something years ago.
Yeah, I don't quote me. I
Flash
believe they bought it.
Was it a code language, a platform? What was Flash?
Both. It was a graphical interface with coding that allowed you to create animations that you could put some kind of code behind, or you can just do straight animations, but you could use code to manipulate it or make it look good and do other things.
And to that point, it could look so good that people wouldn't realize that Flash was running that. And this is kind of an interesting thing for our industry as we do web development. There's cycles. Flash was hot. And if you were a Flash developer or a Flash coder at the right time, you could have gotten a lot of work. But if you didn't figure out how to not also have Flash, when they sunsetted that, you were done.
Right, exactly. It was not going to be used. Now, the fun and interesting part of Flash was the things that you could do, and people were actually really comfortable waiting for a website back then. Think about it. You used to wait like a minute and a half as you watched that little
the loading bar
across, right?
The loading bar was real.
And now we get frustrated after 2 seconds.
2 seconds. If my website doesn't come up in 2 seconds, I instantly think it's broken and I move on.
Yeah, all for like just an animation that was going to happen on the screen.
I love this. We're going to stop here because there's many more, but we're going to have other episodes just like this where we go over tech headlines. We'll end with more fun things that have been made redundant and destroyed on the internet, because I think it's so interesting. The more we use this technology of the internet, that black box with a red light on it, the more we find new cool things and have to say goodbye to the old.
For details and show notes about today's show, go to floridapodcastnetwork.com. And we want our community of Florida enthusiasts to grow. Join in with our superfans, the FPN Insiders, on Facebook, Clubhouse, and Good Pods. Just search for FPN Insiders, and of course, find us anytime at iwantclarity.com.
Be sure to visit all the great shows on the Florida Podcast Network. You can find them at floridapodcastnetwork.com, because we want more berries, and that summer feeling is so wonderful and warm. Watermelon sugar high.